That is everyone who has indicated they wanted to testify. Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did sign up. I did.
You did sign up, but you didn't indicate
No.
whether you wanted to testify or not.
I'm sorry. Forgive me for that.
You have to be able to read to testify in this committee.
Yes, I understand that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Michael King, representing the Sheriff's Association. I meant to sign that little pro, and I'm sorry about that.
You did that, but you didn't designate that you wanted to testify.
I see. All right.
Sorry to be so nitpicky.
Well, here I am anyway. I don't have a sermon from the Mount for you. I do have information that you might want to have, though. First of all, we've been hearing a lot about the sheriffs. The word keeps on coming up. And for the record, the Sheriff's Association has voted to support this bill, and there's lots of reasons for that. One has been spoken to a little bit, but I want to make it clear how important this bill is to law enforcement. And that is that it claws back what we believe was something we all missed last year. And it dealt with, as Mr. Moore said, the bladed weapon piece. Because when we speak about deadly weapons, it's not just firearms. And we believe the way the law reads now is that outside of the cities, that the felons, including people who have served their time for murder and other heinous crimes, the mentally ill, adjudicated mentally ill, illegal aliens, fugitives, all can carry bladed weapons without a permit with complete impunity outside of the cities. And that was a huge issue for us, and we have worked with the sponsor, we worked with the chairman, spoke to many of you here personally, and that's been taken care of. And that's a very, very large issue for law enforcement. Also, some of the earlier drafts we saw of this bill didn't have the same sorts of language that is now in the bill to make sure that felons cannot carry inside of cities without a permit. And so, again, it's very important for law enforcement that that got taken care of. I will tell you that we certainly in law enforcement, and I say that we because I was a murder prosecutor. I did that for a long period of time, and I've seen what gun violence can do. We take these issues very seriously. And I want to tell you, though, at least in my experience, people are going to commit crimes irrespective of whether or not they have a background check, irrespective of whether or not they have a permit. It just happens. And I think that recognition is what led the sheriffs to get to the place they are today. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bateman.
Mr. Chairman Michael, as I indicated earlier, I'm concerned about a possible increase in accidents as a result of more people carrying concealed weapons. And has your organization taken a look at any statistics involving these states that have adopted concealed handguns without having a permit required? Have you taken?
Could you pull the microphone down again, Representative Bateman?
Have you done any studies or viewed any statistics involving these states that have moved this direction as to increases in accidental gun deaths?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bateman, our organization has not gone out and tried to find those studies, but I can tell you that accidents happen. They happen all the time. There's nothing in this bill, though, that I believe will either increase or decrease the accident level, because people already own firearms. People can already carry them openly in almost every location in the state. Accidents do happen, and they're horrific when they are firearm related, but I just don't know that anybody has the statistic that can correlate it to the concealed weapon issue.
Further question, Representative Luker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kane, you mentioned the fix about that was left out, or however you want to call that. But if you could separate that out, and we had two bills here today, one fixing that issue, and the other a bill to have permitless carry. Where would the sheriffs be on just the permitless carry part of this?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Luker, I believe the sheriff's vote would be the same. In fact, No, I can't really say that. I was going to say the original version of this bill had actually a higher rate of votes in favor. From my discussions with my association members, I believe that the vote would be very close to the same.
Representative Luker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kane, I'm concerned about officer safety out there, and also being able to distinguish the criminal from the lawful abiding citizen. Is there a benefit or not to an officer when you have a stop, and if there's an issue about whether there's a lawful firearm, in identifying a person more easily because they have a permit, as opposed to trying to guess or whether they're a felon or a person that shouldn't have it. So in other words, is there a safety issue that the sheriffs are concerned about at all in that lack of having a permit?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Luker, there's a two-part answer to this question. The first part is that there is no question whatsoever that under the current permit system, when people are permitted, it gets put into the eyelet system. So when a car gets pulled over, they would have the ability to determine whether or not the person has a permit or not. It doesn't mean they're going to be armed at that particular time. That does exist. That will not go away because people will still be obtaining permits both in the enhanced system and for reciprocity reasons. But law enforcement doesn't rely on that as the be-all and end-all, and that's the second part. For all intents and purposes, law enforcement, as you may know if you've ever been pulled over, they treat almost every stop as if it is a person armed in that vehicle. And the reason they do that is because very often people are. And I can tell you from my own experience, having dealt with homicides by 14-year-olds, that it happens, and that's how law enforcement officers will treat any particular stop. Moreover, they have the ability to run, once they identify the person, run the person through the National Crime Information Computer to find out if, in fact, they're a felon. They can run through eyelets to find out whether they've been adjudicated mentally ill, and they can determine whether or not they are a fugitive. So they still have those safeguards.
And one
Representative Luker.
question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kane, so could you give us a bottom line as to why sheriffs support the permitless carry?
Mr. Kane?
Mr. Chairman, I obviously cannot speak for the mind of every sheriff that voted for this. I can tell you I've been present at many discussions. One is there is a significant group that have the same philosophy as the Second Amendment Alliance and the NRA on this issue. There's also a significant group that recognizes that we had to fix the piece involving the bladed weapons. And that was very important. Now, how they all number, I can't tell you, but I can tell you those were the two major reasons. And I think also the recognition that we already have it outside of the cities, and that the world hasn't changed for law enforcement.
Thank you.
Representative Crosti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kane, I've through a lot of this process, certainly I've heard from the Sheriff's Association that your organization supports this. I've heard from a number of chiefs of police through some of the op-eds, and not just the 3 Ada County ones that I mentioned earlier, but some from North Idaho as well. Can you tell me how the sheriffs and the chiefs of police interact, and what that relationship looks like in terms of public safety?
Mr. Chairman,
Kane.
Representative Crosti, I'll tell you that the relationship between the Chiefs of Police Association and the Sheriff's Association is one of close friendship and cooperation. that we work together. I don't know that Lloyd's of London would have predicted we'd be on the opposite sides on this bill, but we are. At least some of the chiefs are. But it happens, and I can tell you that some of the sheriffs are also opposed, but the large majority are supporting. But we work together, we talk together every week telephonically, all through the session, through our representatives, and we trade information, and we work pretty much hand in glove.
Mr. Chairman?
Crosti.
So as far as the scope of, I'm going to say coverage, and I know there's a better word for that, but just in my limited understanding of government for what it is, the chiefs of police, or the chiefs of police would be in charge of the police in their cities, and then the sheriffs would be protecting outside of the cities. Is that a reasonable understanding?
And inside the city as well. They're responsible inside the city too, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that's what I
Mr.
want to clarify.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McCroskey, the chairman's right. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, and he has the jurisdiction to go anywhere inside or outside of the city and enforce the laws. Now, obviously, they have city police departments, and they take the laboring oar on most of the work inside of the cities. But I will also tell you that uniformly, there's cross-deputization agreements between the chiefs and the sheriffs to work both inside and outside of the cities.
Thank you.